Madden brothers weren't cosplaying working class rebellion, they were living it. Growing up in Waldorf, Maryland, they experienced a particular kind of restlessness that comes from being stuck between farmland and chain store corridors. Too far from DC to feel urban, but too developed to feel rural. Their father left when they were young, leaving their mother to raise four kids on her own, which meant the economic anxiety threading through their lyrics wasn't performative, it was biographical. Formed in 1996, Good Charlotte spent their early years developing their sound and building a following in the Maryland, D.C. area music scene. But while many bands in the emerging pop punk movement came from college towns and established indie communities, the Madden brothers were documenting a different kind of American teenager. The cul-de-sac kid stuck between strip malls and subdivisions, too privileged for genuine hardship, but too economically anxious for real security. Their breakthrough came through persistence rather than industry connections. After years of relentless touring and self promotion, they caught the attention of Epic Records in the year 2000, leading to their major label debut, The Young and the Hopeless, in 2002. But the success felt earned rather than manufactured. By the time MTV discovered them, they'd already been the soundtrack for suburban alienation across middle America. If you listen to The Young and the Hopeless today, you'll hear complete frustration with split level limitations. Hold On addressed real financial stress and family dysfunction. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous wasn't punk kids playing dress up with class consciousness. It was actual have-nots calling out the haves with the kind of specificity that only comes from true resentment. Visually, they nailed the sweet spot between accessibility and edge. Joel and Benji's spiked hair, black eyeliner, black hoodies, black dickies looked rebellious enough to scandalize parents, but weren't so extreme they'd get you suspended from school. Their tattoos told stories. Their piercings suggested depth, but everything felt approachable rather than intimidating. They looked like the misfit kids at your high school, not like visiting aliens from some underground scene you'd never heard of. Musically, they perfected the sound that would define mall punk. Real, raw energy filtered through pop structures, hooky enough for mainstream radio. They weren't dumbing anything down, they were making complexity more easily understood, creating songs that hit you in the gut emotionally, whether you understood music theory or just needed something to soundtrack your high school era melancholy. Good Charlotte had figured out how to channel strip mall restlessness into attainable rebellion, but even the most legitimate bands need infrastructure to reach their audience. And that's exactly what Hot Topic was building. Hot Topic launched in 1989, but it took more than a decade to find its true calling. Originally focused on concert merchandise and band tees, the store transformed during the late 90s as alternative music moved from underground scenes into heavy MTV rotation. By the time Good Charlotte emerged, Hot Topic had positioned itself as something unprecedented, a chain store that functioned like a cultural embassy for kids trapped in scene-free zones. The key innovation wasn't just in the merchandise, it was in understanding geography. A kid in Odessa, Texas, or Shaker Heights, Ohio, might be hundreds of miles from the nearest independent record store or underground venue. Hot Topic could put alternative culture right in their local mall, making subculture within reach for teens who'd otherwise never encounter it. The democratization went beyond geographic access. Hot Topic created price tiers that acknowledged economic reality. If you couldn't afford a $40 band hoodie, you could still get pins and patches for under $5. You could build alternative credibility incrementally, adding pieces to your identity as the money from your after-school job allowed. More importantly, Hot Topic functioned as a community space in ways that pure retail shouldn't have been able to achieve. Kids would plan trips there, not just stumble upon it during routine mall visits. The bright aisles became trusted spaces for cultural education and community formation. You'd discover bands through merch before hearing their music, learn about different subgenres through t-shirt designs, and find other kids who shared your outsider status. Good Charlotte and Hot Topic's strength emerged from the same cultural need. Both were responses to suburban teens feeling disconnected from mainstream culture, but lacking access to credible choices. They weren't trying to exploit mall punk, they were mall punk, channeling real life experiences before major label polish or corporate strategy meetings got involved. Good Charlotte provided the soundtrack for strip mall alienation, while Hot Topic provided the physical space where that alienation could transform into community. Together, they created something incredible, a version of non mainstream aesthetic that was both accessible and unforced, commercial and genuine, mainstream enough to reach kids everywhere, but edgy enough that it still felt like rebellion. The timing was everything. MTV still mattered for musical discovery, but the internet wasn't yet sophisticated enough to replace physical gathering spaces. Malls were still thriving as teen social centers, providing the third space where kids could exist independently from home and school. Alternative music was breaking into mainstream consciousness, but the infrastructure for suburban kids to access it was still really underdeveloped. Good Charlotte and Hot Topic filled that gap perfectly, creating a cultural ecosystem where teens in identical subdivisions could discover their alternative identity, soundtrack it with authentic music, and express it through approachable fashion. They proved that mall punk wasn't lesser than urban punk scenes. It was different, serving real needs for real teens who deserved their own version of musical community. Their early success wasn't about selling out or dumbing down subcultural expression. It was about recognizing that credibility could coexist with accessibility, that commercial success didn't automatically equal artistic death, and that sometimes the most honest cultural movements grow not from underground purity, but from the sincere attempt to serve teens who felt left behind by mainstream culture. In those fluorescent lit aisles, rebellion was always available for the price of a band tee and the courage to claim your outsider persona. And for a generation of suburban kids, that was exactly the revolution they needed.